Hello learners, welcome to this session on statistics in psychology. In this session we are going to take another topic which is very essential for your statistics in psychology courses, which is known as measures of central tendency. This topic has been divided into two parts. The first part basically will discuss about the concept of measure of central tendency, and in the second part we will cover about the numerical part, how we calculate the measure of central tendency with the help of different formulas and the steps that we used to follow and we need to follow during the calculation of any central tendency measures. So, in this session we are going to cover certain things like concept of central tendency of the data, then the different measure of central tendency. You might be aware about these things like mean, median, mode, and we will try to focus upon its properties and advantage as well as the limitations of all these three measure of central tendency, which is known as mean, median and mode. Learner, we have discussed lots of things about statistics till now. You are aware that the statistics is nothing but it is the characteristics of sample. As we have discussed in the previous sessions, like there are two things, one is called parameter, another one is called statistics. Parameter is known as the characteristics of population, whereas statistics is known as characteristics of sample. Here we are going to talk about another basic things which are essential for the further analysis. As we always say, the statistics deal with three things. First, to organize the data, the second to analyze the data, and the third is to interpret the data. In order to organize the data, you have studied well how to organize the data in terms of tabulation, in terms of frequency distribution. Also, you have studied about the graphical representation. Here we are going to talk about another things which is also very essential, or which is essential functions of statistics, which is called analysis part. So, when we have a data, how we can make an inference out of it, means through graphical representation we can make certain assumptions or certain explanation about the data. We can explain something about the nature of the data, but what about the further analysis? So, for further analysis the basic essential things are required, which comes under the measures of central tendency. Suppose for example, if you take an example with your own life, if you have studied numerous of mathematical calculation in your previous courses or programs, you have seen that there are numerous technique that talks about the value which is called average. Let me take another example through which you can easily understand this concept what we are going to discuss. So, in this session especially. So, the thing is that when somebody asks you what was your performance in class 12, you generally say I got 99% marks, maybe 95, 96 kind of things you generally say. You hardly mention each subject marks or the percentage of each paper that you have covered, like physics, chemistry, biology, maybe physical education. You hardly mention all these scores in front of others. Why you mention only one score, and on the basis of this performance anyone can easily understand what was your performance and how much you are effective in your +2 examination. So, by giving one number, what you are doing here? You are trying to give a single representative number which comprises all of your performance with the different papers, different subjects that you have studied in your +2. If you say 95%, means you are calculating here the average of all 4 or 5 papers that you have studied in your +2. So, this single number gives a very essential information about your performance, and anyone can say something about this performance. Let me take another example through which you can understand what actually happens with the measure of central tendency and why this is a requirement of the initial phase of the statistical analysis. As I told you just before that the measure of central tendency is basically essential for the further analysis of the data or deeper analysis of the data. So, you can say that this is the beginning of analysis and this is the basics of analysis through which you can form major higher order analysis of your data to make extraordinary or we can say a very impressive inferences about your data. Suppose you have a data, for instance marks in psychology obtained by the student of the class 12 standard, and you want to analyze it statistically, means all the 12 standards of your class has got certain marks, and you want to analyze all of the scores in a certain way. So what statistical technique you are going to apply? As far as till now what you have studied, you can of course organize your data with the help of different classification and tabulation that you have studied before. But further, for the further analysis, the data can also be graphically represented, also it can be analyzed. But if you want to further analyze the data, then you can compute average marks, as I have just given you example through which you generally reflect your marks what you have attained in your +2. Then you can also calculate the midpoint of the performance of your classroom, of your classmates, of all the students, those who are attended +2 examination given for the psychology, or you can also find out the maximum frequency which has been there in your classroom performance, or you can say what is the score which has been achieved by maximum student in your class. So all these things can be one of the essential things through which we can understand the data. So here what we are doing when we compute average to say something which comes under the mean, and when we talk about the middle score, it is somehow related with the median, and when you talk about the most frequent marks, then it comes under the mode part. So let me go more in detail about the concept of central tendency of the data. Measure of central tendency provide a single value that indicates the general magnitude of the data, and this single value provide information about the characteristics of the data by identifying the value at one or near of the central location of the data. So as far as the King and Minium has discussed about the central tendency, they describe that the measure of central tendency as a summary figure that helps in describing a central location of the certain group of a score. So these two things that we have discussed just before, you can see that the measure of central tendency is something through which we get a single value which indicate the general magnitude of the data. So you have a group of data and you want to explain the nature of the data in a single word, then you can go for the central tendency. Or in other words, you can say this central tendency is somehow looks like a good representative of the data, and this single value provide a maximum information or characteristics about the data. Suppose you are saying that you got 95% marks in your +2, it means your overall performance in each paper or you have studied would be near about 95, or maybe not very deviant from 95, although it can be possible because in the mean calculation we will see further that how the extreme score also makes influence on the calculation of average. But for one value that you are reflecting in front of others which indicates your overall performance, so you can see that the measure of central tendency provide a single value, but it has all the general characteristics, magnitude of the data which provide all the information about the data. So if you talk about the main function of measure of central tendency, then we can say it provides a summary figure, the single figure that can explain more about the data. Data can be easily reduced to a single figure, which is also one of the function of the central tendency. It will help to estimate the population mean. So if you have you are aware that in any study, in any researches, we can't observe all the unit of entire population. So what we do, we elect or select certain number of sample, and on the basis of that sample we predict about or make inference about the population. So these measurement of the central tendency with the help of sample could also help you to estimate the mean of the population. So this is another feature of the central tendencies. Through central tendency, it will also help you to making a certain decisions at the certain time, like suppose one college has to take admission of the students, how they can decide about what would be the cutoff. Of course, it can be on the basis of the average score of your performance of the +2. Suppose you can see in the cutoff that is 99, 95. So what you do, you go and see your average performance, and accordingly they select you. So this is also very, central tendency also helps a decision maker to take decisions, or as a researcher to take decision whether your nature of data, how much your effective data is there, and what actually at the essential or at the initial stage what actually data is talking about. So with the help of central tendency, you will have a certain kind of analysis, you will have a certain kind of functions, you will have a certain kind of assumptions about your data, you can make a significance impression about your data with the help of central tendency. So it also helps us to comparison. It can be at one extent at the very initial stage, we can also compare two group of data with the help of central tendency. So let me talk one by one all these three central tendency as I have discussed. One is mean, the second one is median, and the third one is mode. So first of all, we will talk about mean, which is also known as arithmetic mean. So mean of the sample, there is a symbol that we use. So mean of the sample we indicate with the capital M, or sometimes we say X bar, capital X bar. Whereas if we have calculated the mean of the population, we use the word mu, which has a symbol that you can see in the slide as well, and it is one of the most commonly used measure, as you are aware, and as in the example that I have discussed with you, in which what you have done, you have calculated the average of your performance, which is also known as mean of the performance. So it is very common, most common measure of central tendency, and often referred to the average. One of the most sensitive measure of central tendency, it is to be known, because the extreme score always influence the mean scores. We will see how extreme score affects the mean scores when we go for the calculation. Further, a statistical technique can be computed based on the mean, thus making it a more useful, which can be stated that the mean is more useful because on the basis of mean score we can go for the further statistical analysis, and we can compute more higher order statistics as well. So mean is total of all the score in the data divided by the total number of a score. This is the simplest way you can understand about the mean. So when we talk about mean, what is mean? Mean is the total score of all the scores in the data divided by the total number of a score, or in other words you can say the average of the score. How do we calculate the average? We first add all the numbers, units of the data, and divided by the total number of the data. So this is a very brief about the mean. We will talk more about the mean, but before that let me talk about the median. So median is another central tendency which is also very popular in some of the context, whereas the mean is usually we follow for the further statistical analysis, but the median has also a very significant role in some of the context. We will discuss more about it in further. So let me talk about the median. Median is a midpoint, and which is a distribution where we can say the distribution is below and above, which is lie half of the scores. So median is a point in any distribution below and above which is lie half of the scores. So if you have 11 score, then the middle score should be like this, that the score which is the 50% of the score is above that score, and the 50% of score is the below that score. So median is also referred as the P50. P50 here means the percentile 50, and the symbol of the median is MD, you can say, and the median is the middle score in ordered distribution. This is not the middle score which is the distribution which is not in the particular order. If the distribution, if you have a data and if you arrange those data in the either in ascending order or descending order, and whatever the data comes in the very center or the 50 percentile position, that would be considered as a median score. So let me talk more about mode as well. So mode is denoted by the MO symbol, and the mode is also a score of the distribution that occurs most frequently. Means mode can be easily associated with the most frequently data. So if you have a data set and those data which is frequently occurring, that can be considered as a mode. So frequently occurring does not always a mode, those which are most frequently. So those data is the most frequent in nature, that can be considered as a mode, that we usually consider as a mode. Though it is, if the scores is in a distribution greatly vary, then it is possible that there is no mode. So suppose if you have a set of data which all the data are differ from each other, then how you can decide whether there is a frequent data or not? If no one data is repeating another way, or there is all the data are different from each other, then we can say there is no frequent occurring data. In that case, there would be no mode for that set of data. So that data set has no mode because there is no frequent occurring numbers. So mode as such does not provide an adequate characterization of the distribution, but it just take into the consideration the most frequent score, and other scores are not considered. So this is a kind of limitations you can understand, and sometimes it is very useful when we have a different nature of the data. We will talk about it more in just after a few minutes, but here you have to understand mode is only associated with the number which is more frequent in nature, most frequent in nature, and which is mostly occurring in the data set. So now we have discussed three things together about the central tendency, measure of central tendency. These measure of central tendency are mean, median and mode. Now the questions comes that how do we choose the measure of central tendency? Means if we have a data set, then you have to decide whether you should calculate mean, median or mode. On what basis we choose a measure of central tendency? For this, I would like to mention something which can be the indicator through which you can decide which measure of central tendency would be effective for your data set. The first criteria that you can say that should be taken into consideration, one is the scale of measurement. So whatever the data you have collected, you have to first identify which scale you have used to measure the data. So suppose your data is in nominal scale, ordinal scale, ratio scale, interval scale. On the basis of the nature of the data, you will decide that which central tendency is effective. For example, for nominal scale, one can compute mode but not mean or median, because with regard to the nominal scale, you can see that we can only calculate the frequency of occurring of certain things, like in your class how many males are there, how many females are there. Then you can see, if you have to see that how many people belongs to the certain category, then the nominal scale can be only explained with the help of frequency. And this number of frequency, on the basis of this frequency, we can only calculate mode, neither mean nor median, because we can't arrange the nominal data into ascending or descending order. If we can't arrange these things in ascending or descending order, we can't calculate median. As far as the mean is concerned, we can't go for the mathematical calculation, because the nominal data itself is the categorical data in nature, like gender, like religions, like something other, which cannot be mathematically calculated. So only on the basis of frequency we go for the further analysis. For the nominal scale, if you have data in the nominal scale, we can only use mode for the central tendency. With regard to the ordinal scale, median or mode can be used. Again, for ordinal scale, we have two opportunity like median and mode. you are most aware about the different scale that we have discussed in the previous sessions, like nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio scale. So you can understand what is the nature of ordinal scale, the scales which talks about the data in the order like rank number 1, rank number 2, rank number 3, and in some or the other way we can also explain the ordinal scale. So if you have ordinal scale data, you can only use median and mode, because you can't add rank number 1 to rank number 2, or you can't get by adding rank number 1 and 2 for the rank number 3, because all are the separate, all are the different, maybe their score are very nearby, but the ranking is as such that one has got a very slightly more marks than the rank number 2. So these scores are situated into the ordinal scale, where you can't use mean score, but you have opportunity to calculate median and mode. We will see in further about these things in a detail, how do we go for the calculation of mean and mode. With regard to the interval or ratio scale, we can compute mean, because all mathematical calculation can be done with the help of if you have a data that is collected with the interval or ratio scale. If the data is normally distributed, we will compute mean. If it is not normally distributed, we will compute median or mode. Here I am using the word normally distribution. Normally distribution word can be explained further in more detail in upcoming lecture, because this is a concept which we usually discuss in the further analysis of the data. But for time being, you can understand, if the data is normally distributed, it means if the data is normally distributed, you can use mean for the central tendency, and if it is not, you can go for the median or mode. Let me talk about the properties of mean, median, mode. We start with the properties of mean. So mean is sensitive to the actual positions of the each and every score in the distribution, and if the score is included in the distribution, then mean or average of the distribution will change. So because when we calculate average, you will see further that how the mean is very sensitive with the all scores, because when we go for the calculation of mean, we consider all the score during the calculation. So it is very sensitive with the actual position of the score, with the distribution and all the scores when we go for. So mean, suppose for example, mean of the score like 5, 4, 6, 3, 2 is 4, but if we change the scores like 5, 4, 6, 3, 2, 8, then the mean will be 4.67. Although number of data is same, but you can see that the number of data is slightly changed. Means in the previous example, when we had 5, 4, 6, 3, 2, there were 5 data. In 5, 4, 6, 3, 2, 8, we have 6 data, and accordingly the mean score gets changed. So mean score, mean does not a balance point of any distribution, because the mean is especially effective when we want to measure the central tendency to reflect the sum of the scores. When we have opportunity to sum all the scores, then we can go for the mean, because mean consider all the score during their calculations. So let me talk about the advantage of mean. The advantage of mean is like this, as definition suggested, like mean is very rigid, which is quality of a good measure of central tendency. We frequently use this measure of central tendency. It is very easy to understand and also very easy to calculate. How it is very easy, we will discuss in the further calculative part. Then all the score of the distribution are also considered during the calculation of mean. This is the kind of advantage that you can see in the mean. So when we go for the calculation of mean, we consider all the data during the calculation. Further, the mathematical calculation can be also carried out with the help of mean. This is also one of the advantages, and the fluctuation in sampling are least likely to affect the mean. So if the number of sampling is fluctuating or the nature of sampling is fluctuating, then it very least likely to affect the mean. So these are the advantages of mean. You can see here. As far as the limitation of mean, as you can easily understand that the outlier or extreme value can have an impact on mean, because the mean consider all the scores, so any scores which are outlier or extreme can change the entire score of mean. When there are open-ended classes such as 10 and above, below 5, mean cannot be computed, because for the calculation of mean all data should be there. Without knowing the data, we can't consider the mean. So if you have open-ended classes, you can't go for the calculation of mean. If a score in the data is missing, or suppose in some of the cases you lost the data or the data is not clear, you can't calculate the mean, because for calculation of mean all the data are required. Although if you want to eliminate those data which are not clear, then you can definitely calculate the mean, but if you have a confusion with the data and the missing data, you can't calculate the mean. It cannot be determined on the basis of graph, or it is not suitable for the data that is skewed or very asymmetrical. So with these are the limitations that I have discussed about the mean. Let me talk about the properties of median. So when compared mean, median, then the median is less sensitive to the extreme score or outlier, because median talks about the middle score, 50 percentile position of the score. So it hardly matters, it hardly sensitive towards the extreme scores. So when a distribution is skewed or asymmetrical in nature, median can be adequately used, because the extreme score does not affect the median score. Therefore median can be adequately used when we have a skewed or asymmetrical data. When a distribution is open-ended, that is actual score at one end of the distribution is not known, the median can also be computed, because it talks about the middle of the score. So let me talk about the advantage of median. It is easy to understand and calculate as similar as the mean. It is not affected by outlier, which is also can be considered as advantage, or extreme score. It does not affect with the extreme score, so this is also considered as one of the advantage of median. It can be computed for the group data that is open-ended in classes. It is also very good advantage for the median. In certain cases, it is possible to identify median through graphical representation as well. In certain cases, not in all the way, but in some of the cases, we can also calculate median with the help of graphical representation. Let me talk about the limitation of median. The computation of median can be time consuming. You will see that there are certain steps that we follow. When we have a large number of data, when the large number of data is involved, then it takes more time as compared to the mean. Median cannot be computed exactly when an ungrouped data is even. So when we have ungrouped data which is even in number, like if you have a data like 10, 12, we cannot compute exact value of median, although we somehow calculate the median on the basis of certain assumptions and calculation, but it is not exactly. This can be considered as the limitation of the median as well. It is not based on the each of every scores in the distribution. As we can see in the median, we consider all the score during the calculation, but it is not based in the median, so this can be considered as a limitation. It can be affected by the sampling fluctuation. If the sampling fluctuation is there, then the median can be affected. At the last, let me talk about the properties of mode, then advantage and disadvantage of mode. Mode can be used with the variables that can be measured on the nominal scale, which is very essential and which is very unique in nature, through which you can mode can be recognized. So mode can be easily used in the nominal scale, which cannot be interpreted or analyzed by the other means of the central tendency like median and mean. Mode is easier to compute than the mean and median. If we compare the easiness, then definitely mode is more easier. Mode is not affected by the outlier or extreme score as similar as the median. So as far as the advantage is concerned, it can be used for the qualitative as well as quantitative data. So this is a major advantage. It is not affected by the outliers or extreme score as you can see in the median as well. Even in the distribution has one or more than one open-ended classes, mode can be easily computed. You will see in your calculation as well. So as far as the limitation of mode is concerned, it is sometimes possible that the score in the data vary from each other, and in such cases the data may not have any mode. If all the data are different from each other, there would be no mode, and this is a kind of limitation. If all the data are different from each other, you can't calculate mode. Mode is not based on the whole distribution, it is based on the most frequently occurring data. It may not be possible to compute further mathematical procedure based on the mode, because it somehow limit the calculation, because it's based upon the only most frequent data. So with this we have covered almost all the things in the conceptual things about the measure of central tendency. Let me summarize these sessions. That we started with the concept what actually meant central tendency is all about, what are the need to have a central tendency, and with the help of central tendency how we can give a one number through which we can represent the entire data. We talked about three measures of central tendency, which is called mean, median, mode, and accordingly we have seen their limitation, their advantage, as well as their nature, their characteristics of all these three measures. Hope you have understand this concept. In the further lecture, we will calculate, we will go for the calculation part and see how do we calculate mean, median, mode for the group, ungrouped data. Thank you so much.